Hey everyone, ready for another deep dive? Today we're going to be taking a look at India.
Yeah.
Specifically, we're going to be looking at their latest economic survey.
It's a really fascinating one.
I mean, if you can imagine bustling city streets, vibrant markets,
No, yeah.
all those graphs with those upward trends.
Up and to the right.
Exactly. That's what we're going to be unpacking today as we look at India's economic landscape.
It's really a particularly interesting time to be looking at India's economy, too.
Right.
Especially given, all the changes that are happening globally right now.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I noticed right off the bat was just their projected growth rate.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be between 6.3% and 6.8% for fiscal year 2026.
Really impressive.
I mean, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, especially when you consider the global context.
Right.
Things aren't exactly, rosy everywhere.
Absolutely. So how do we grapple with that? We see these optimistic projections for India, but we also have to keep in mind how intertwined their economy is with, the rest of the world.
Right.
So how is this global, downturn or slowdown impacting India's manufacturing sector specifically?
Well, it's definitely being felt. Weaker global demand means fewer orders for Indian manufacturers.
Okay.
In fact, the survey shows that India's manufacturing PMI actually dipped into contraction territory
Oh, wow.
in the latter half of 2024,
Okay.
which is, significant
Yeah.
because the PMI, the Purchasing Managers Index, is like a key indicator of economic health. And a contraction suggests that, manufacturing activity is slowing down, which can have ripple effects throughout the economy.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit of a reality check
Yeah.
amidst these positive projections.
Right.
But on the other hand, the survey does highlight India's service sector
Yes.
as a real bright spot.
Yeah.
And, could this robust service sector be the key to weathering, those global storms?
That's the question that everyone's asking.
Right.
And, it's one the survey really grapples with. I mean, the service sector has been a real driver of GDP growth, even amidst these, global headwinds.
Right.
But whether it can single-handedly carry the weight of India's economic growth over the long term is debatable.
Right.
We have to remember that a healthy economy typically thrives on a balance between various sectors.
Right. It's not about just one sector doing well. It's about the interplay between all of them.
Exactly.
And the survey does highlight some positive developments within specific sectors in India.
Yeah.
And they specifically mentioned horticulture and e-commerce as areas of success.
Yeah. I mean, these sectors are really displaying remarkable growth.
Yeah.
And the survey actually dives into this really interesting success story of grape farmers in Nashik. And they actually shifted their focus to producing export quality grapes.
Okay.
And this change has led to, obviously a significant increase in grape exports.
Right.
But more importantly, it's transformed the lives of these farmers.
Now that's what I call tangible impact.
Yeah, absolutely.
The report mentions this as detailed in box 9X.2. And yeah, I have to say it's just a powerful example of how focusing on quality, and tapping into global markets can have really positive effects on people's lives.
For sure.
So is this shift towards export-oriented agriculture something we're seeing more broadly in India?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
This is a trend that is gaining traction.
Okay.
And it has the potential to really revitalize rural economies.
Yeah.
The survey also talks about the government's e-commerce export hub initiative,
Okay.
which is designed to help small and medium businesses connect with those global markets.
Okay.
And it focuses on streamlining logistics and promoting inclusivity in the e-commerce sector.
So it's not just about boosting exports, but also about making sure that there are opportunities for a wider range of businesses to participate.
Exactly.
Okay, yeah. It seems like India is really strategically positioning itself to leverage these growth sectors. But let's be real, no economy is without its challenges.
Of course not.
So what are some of the headwinds that India is facing?
Well, I think climate change is a major concern that the survey really highlights.
Okay.
The research by Negi and Ramaswamy, which the survey cites, shows a direct link between rainfall deficits and crop yield losses in India.
Okay.
And this is really concerning, especially given India's, reliance on agriculture.
That's a sobering thought.
Yeah.
I mean, the unpredictable nature of climate change could have really significant repercussions
For sure.
on food security, livelihoods.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a reminder that economic growth has to go hand in hand with sustainable practices.
For sure.
And speaking of sustainability, the survey also expresses concern over India's reliance on China for green technologies. It points out that China's share of solar panels exceeds 80%.
80%.
At every stage of manufacturing.
At all stages. Yeah.
That's a lot. So how can India address this dependence? I mean, the survey mentions public transportation as a potential solution.
Right.
Can you explain that a little bit further?
Yeah. So the survey's logic here is actually really fascinating.
Okay.
They argue that investing in robust public transport systems can actually reduce India's dependence on private vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
And this, in turn, could lessen the need for those imported technologies.
Right.
For electric mobility, which is where China currently holds that dominant position.
Oh, okay. That's a really interesting perspective. It kind of reframes the issue
Yeah.
by looking at transportation systems.
Yeah,
And it also highlights the potential for, more equitable energy transition.
for sure. For sure.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, I think it's a compelling argument. But the survey also acknowledges that, implementing such a large-scale shift in transportation infrastructure requires significant investment and careful planning.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's a long-term solution
Yeah.
that needs to be approached strategically.
That's true. There are no quick fixes
No.
for these complex issues.
Nope.
But it's clear that India is actively seeking solutions
Yeah,
that align with their development goals.
absolutely.
Speaking of looking ahead, we can't ignore, the elephant in the room, or maybe the AI in the room.
Yeah.
The AI. So the survey dives into the potential impact of AI on India's labor market,
Right?
and it cites a rather provocative quote from OpenAI's founder,
Okay.
who suggests that we might have AI workers by the end of 2025.
Wow.
That's next year.
Yeah.
So is India ready for this level of disruption?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Right.
And I think, the survey really highlights the need for robust institutional frameworks to manage this transition. It talks about enabling institutions, right?
Uh-huh.
That equip the workforce with the skills needed for an AI-driven economy.
So it's about being proactive,
Absolutely.
preparing the workforce.
Yeah.
Okay. And what about those who might be, displaced by automation?
Right. And so that's where the ensuring institutions come in.
Okay.
And, these institutions would provide a safety net
Uh-huh.
for those who might be negatively impacted by AI-driven job displacement.
Okay, so it's like a balanced approach,
Exactly.
embracing the potential of AI.
Right.
But at the same time, acknowledging the potential downsides.
Yeah, you got to look at both sides.
And trying to mitigate those.
Absolutely.
Okay. We've covered a lot of ground already in just this first part of our deep dive into India's economic landscape.
Yeah, we have.
I mean, from, global slowdowns to specific sectors to the AI revolution, it seems like they're facing a very dynamic economic environment.
Very dynamic, and this is just the beginning.
Welcome back. I'm excited to continue our exploration of India's economy.
One thing that stood out to me in the economic survey was how much it focused on India's role in global trade.
Yeah, it's definitely a key theme throughout the survey. I think it's really interesting how they're navigating these evolving dynamics of global trade.
Right. And they even provide some historical context, too.
Yeah.
They go way back, all the way to the Industrial Revolution.
Uh-huh.
And I found it fascinating how they point out that tariffs, which we kind of view negatively today, actually played a crucial role
Right.
in the industrialization of many developed economies.
Right. Back then, they weren't just about protectionism. They were strategically used
Okay.
to actually nurture domestic industries
Okay, interesting.
during those critical stages of development.
So it's the rules of the game have changed.
Exactly.
Okay. But speaking of changing rules, the survey then jumps into a discussion about something called non-tariff measures, or NTMs.
I got to be honest, I wasn't super familiar with this term.
Mm-hmm.
What exactly are NTMs?
Okay, so think of NTMs as those regulations and standards
Okay.
that can impact trade flows,
Uh-huh.
but they're not outright tariffs.
Okay.
So, there could be things like import quotas
Okay.
or specific labeling requirements for products
Okay.
or even sanitary and phytosanitary standards.
Okay.
So essentially it's any regulation that could create a barrier to trade.
Okay, so it's not just about the price of goods anymore.
No.
It's also about meeting these standards and regulations.
Exactly.
Okay. And the survey actually mentions the European Union's deforestation regulation as a potential example.
Right.
Could you talk about that a bit more?
Yeah, so this regulation is aimed at preventing deforestation
Okay.
by restricting the import of products that are, linked to forest clearing.
Okay.
And while it's a commendable goal,
Right.
it does create those compliance challenges for exporters
Hmm.
in countries like India, which have these significant agricultural sectors.
Right.
So it's a good example of how those NTMs, even when well-intentioned, can have, some unintended consequences.
It's a tough balancing act.
Yeah.
We want to protect the environment, but at the same time, we want to make sure that, economies can participate in global trade.
For sure.
So how is India responding to these new challenges?
Well, the survey indicates that they're taking a really proactive approach
Okay.
by diversifying their export markets.
Okay.
So they're not just reliant on those traditional partners anymore.
Okay.
They're exploring opportunities in new markets.
Gotcha. So don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Exactly.
And then, of course, we can't forget about the e-commerce boom,
Right.
which is really reshaping global trade as we speak.
Yeah.
So what are some of the key takeaways regarding e-commerce?
Okay, well, the survey actually points to India's potential to become a major player in that global e-commerce market.
Oh, wow. Right.
Yeah, and they highlight a number of different factors, like increasing internet penetration, the rise of digital payment systems, and just, evolving consumer behavior.
Yeah, they provide some impressive figures too.
They do.
They project that India's business-to-consumer e-commerce market
Right.
is going to grow at a compound annual growth rate of almost 16%.
That's huge.
That's huge.
And it's not just about consumers buying goods online.
Right.
The survey also discusses how these e-commerce platforms are actually empowering small and medium enterprises
Right.
to reach, global customers.
Okay.
And, that opens up all these new avenues for growth.
Gotcha. Okay. So we've covered global trade and the rise of e-commerce. Now, the survey also delves into financial markets,
Yes.
and they introduce this concept of financialization.
Yes.
Again, not a term I'm super familiar with.
Okay. So financialization essentially refers to the increasing role of financial markets and institutions in the economy. So, it's about how finance is becoming more intertwined with every aspect of our lives.
Okay.
From how businesses operate to how we manage our savings and investments.
So it's finance is becoming more pervasive.
Exactly.
Was that a good thing?
Well, that's the debate, right?
Yeah.
So the survey actually presents both sides of the coin.
Okay.
So on the one hand, well-developed financial markets can be beneficial.
Right.
They provide access to capital, they facilitate investments, and they can really stimulate economic growth.
Okay.
But, excessive financialization, on the other hand, can lead to instability,
Okay.
and it can create risks
Okay.
for the real economy.
Right, like what we saw in 2008
Exactly.
with the financial crisis.
Exactly.
Okay, so where does India stand on this?
Well, the survey emphasizes that, India needs to find that balance.
Okay.
It's about making sure that those financial markets serve the needs of the economy,
Oh.
but without becoming, a source of excessive risk.
Right, so it's about creating a sustainable and inclusive financial system.
Exactly.
Okay. Now let's, zoom out a little bit.
Yeah.
And look at the bigger picture. So the survey identifies several factors that are driving India's economic growth.
Right.
Could you kind of walk us through those?
Okay, well, I think domestic consumption is a major driver.
Okay.
So India has this large and growing middle class
Ah.
with increasing purchasing power.
Right.
And this, coupled with rising incomes and urbanization, is really fueling that consumer spending.
Okay.
In fact, the survey even mentions that housing demand in India has reached a record high.
Oh, well.
Yeah, which, indicates strong consumer confidence
Okay.
and that robust real estate market.
So people are feeling good enough
Yeah.
to make big investments.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a good sign. What else is fueling India's growth?
Well, investment is another key factor,
Okay.
particularly in infrastructure. So the survey, details India's progress in developing its transportation networks, energy systems, and urban infrastructure.
And of course, we can't forget about India's what they call the demographic dividend.
Right.
Having a young and growing workforce
Exactly.
is a huge asset.
Yeah.
So how does the survey address this?
Well, the survey definitely acknowledges that, a young and growing workforce can be a powerful engine of economic growth.
Right.
But it also emphasizes that realizing the full potential of this, like demographic dividend, requires those strategic investments
Yeah.
in things like education,
Mm-hmm.
skills development, and job creation.
Okay.
So it's not just about having a young workforce.
Right.
It's about providing them with the opportunities and resources.
So investing in human capital alongside, the physical infrastructure.
Absolutely.
Okay. Now, before we wrap up this part, I want to touch on one more important topic that the survey discusses, and that's structural reforms.
Yeah.
Can you shed some light on this?
Yeah. So structural reforms are essentially those changes
Okay.
that aim to improve the underlying framework of the economy.
Okay.
So the survey advocates for things like streamlining regulations,
Mhm.
reducing bureaucratic red tape, and really empowering entrepreneurs.
Okay.
And it suggests that, a less is more approach to regulation can really stimulate innovation and investment.
So creating a more business-friendly environment.
Exactly.
But isn't there a risk with that?
Of course. And the survey actually acknowledges that risk,
Okay.
which is why it emphasizes the importance of state capacity.
Okay.
So effective deregulation isn't just about having fewer rules, it's
Right.
about having smarter rules
Okay.
and making sure that the government has the capacity to enforce them effectively.
Right. So it's not just a free-for-all.
Exactly.
It's about creating a regulatory environment that fosters growth,
Right.
but still maintains those necessary safeguards.
Right.
Okay. Well, we've covered an impressive amount of ground again
We have.
in this part of our deep dive.
We've talked about India's approach to global trade, looked at financial markets, and examined the drivers of their economic growth. It's clear that India is at a really pivotal point
Absolutely.
in its economic journey.
And in our final part, we're going to delve into some other crucial topics,
Yeah.
like climate change, agriculture, and the service sector.
And we.
All right, welcome back to our deep dive into India's economy. We've talked about a lot, but there are still some key areas to explore. And I think it makes sense to start this final part with climate change. It's such a defining challenge of our time. And the economic survey really dedicates a significant portion to analyzing India's approach.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the survey really highlights India's commitment to sustainable development, right?
Yeah.
While also meeting their energy needs.
Yeah,
It's a tough balance.
it is a complex equation, but it seems like they're taking it seriously.
Yeah.
The survey mentions COP29, the recent UN climate change conference,
Mhm.
and it talks about their focus on this new climate finance goal. So what's the significance of that for India?
Well, this new goal is all about increasing, financial resources
Okay.
to support climate action, especially in developing countries
Right.
like India.
Sure.
So these funds are really crucial for implementing adaptation and mitigation measures.
Right.
So everything from developing renewable energy infrastructure to building climate resilient communities.
Okay. It's interesting how the survey also brings in urban planning,
Yes.
and it talks about initiatives to make cities more sustainable,
Right.
which makes sense considering how rapidly India is urbanizing.
Absolutely.
So can you tell us a bit more about some of those urban initiatives?
Yeah, for sure. So the survey highlights programs that, are promoting things like green building practices,
Okay.
enhancing urban forestry,
Okay.
and developing, that climate resilient infrastructure.
Okay.
So, I mean, you can kind of imagine cities with more green spaces,
Right.
Buildings designed to conserve energy,
Yeah.
and transportation systems that are, both efficient and eco-friendly.
Okay. While I was reading this survey, there's this program called MIC-HTI that I thought was really cool.
Oh, yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so MIC-HTI stands for Mangrove Initiative for Shoreline Habitats and Tangible Incomes.
Wow.
Quite a mouthful.
That is a mouthful.
But it's a great example of how India is using nature-based solutions
Okay.
to tackle climate change.
All right.
Essentially, it focuses on protecting and restoring mangrove forests along India's coastlines.
Why are mangroves so important?
Well, they're incredibly effective,
Okay.
like natural buffers
Okay.
against coastal erosion and storm surges,
Okay.
which, are becoming more frequent and intense because of climate change.
Right.
But they also act as vital carbon sinks,
Okay.
absorbing and storing large amounts of CO2 from the atmosphere.
It's amazing how nature has these ready-made solutions if we just pay attention
Right.
and protect them.
Exactly.
The survey also talks about water resource management, which is obviously becoming increasingly important in India.
Yeah, for sure.
So what are some of the key takeaways in that area?
Well, water scarcity is a growing concern
Right.
in India.
Yeah.
And the survey highlights a number of initiatives to address this.
Okay.
So things like rainwater harvesting,
Right.
groundwater recharge programs,
Uh-huh.
and the restoration of traditional water bodies, like lakes and ponds.
Okay.
So these measures are crucial for ensuring that water security.
Especially as climate change is already impacting these things.
Right, exactly.
Right. It's a reminder that, sustainable development is about more than just reducing our carbon footprint. It's about, managing all of our natural resources responsibly.
Absolutely.
All right. So let's shift our focus to the agricultural sector, which plays such a crucial role in India's economy
Yeah.
and feeding their population.
It's huge, yeah.
So what does the report say about that?
Well, agriculture is definitely like a cornerstone of the Indian economy, right?
Yeah.
Provides livelihoods for millions of people.
Right.
And contributes significantly to the nation's, food security.
Yeah.
So the survey does a good job of painting a picture of the sector.
Okay.
And it highlights both the successes
Uh-huh.
and the challenges.
Okay, so one of the successes that it points to is the growth of horticulture.
Yes.
And, it mentions how India has become a leading exporter of certain fruits,
Right.
like grapes.
Yeah.
And it actually goes back to that story of the grape farmers
Oh, yeah.
in Nashik,
Right.
who, really transformed their lives by producing those export quality grapes.
Yeah, it's an inspiring story.
It is. What's the bigger lesson there, do you think, for India's agricultural sector as a whole?
Well, I think it illustrates the potential
Okay.
of agricultural innovation and entrepreneurship, right? So it's a testament to what can be achieved when farmers have access to new technologies. They
Okay.
focus on quality,
Uh-huh.
and they're able to tap into those global markets.
So it's about empowering farmers to be more competitive.
Exactly.
Okay. But like you said, there are also challenges,
Yeah, of course.
and the survey doesn't shy away from those, especially the threat of climate change.
Right.
So how does the survey analyze the impact of climate change on agriculture?
Well, it really underscores how vulnerable
Okay.
Indian agriculture is to climate change.
Okay.
It cites research that has found this direct correlation
Uh-huh.
between rainfall deficits
Right.
and significant crop yield losses,
Okay.
which is, especially concerning since a large portion of Indian agriculture still relies on rain-fed irrigation.
Right. So they really need to find solutions for that.
Absolutely.
The survey also discusses the role of technology in agriculture.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, technology has a huge role to play.
Okay.
The survey talks about things like precision farming, which uses, data and sensors
Uh-huh.
to optimize resource use and improve yields.
Okay.
It also mentions remote sensing, which can help, monitor crop health and identify potential problems early on.
It's exciting to see how technology can help address these age-old challenges,
Yeah,
and make agriculture more efficient and sustainable.
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So lastly, let's turn to the service sector, which has become so dominant in India.
Yeah, powerhouse.
Yeah. So what are some of the key insights from the survey there?
Well, the survey, highlights that remarkable growth
Okay.
of the service sector in India,
Uh-huh.
particularly in areas like information technology, telecommunications, tourism.
Right.
So this sector is really a major engine of their economic growth.
Yeah.
It contributes significantly to GDP, employment
Yeah.
and foreign exchange earnings.
It's interesting how the lines are blurring between the service sector and other sectors, like manufacturing.
Right.
And the survey actually uses the term servicification.
Yes.
So can you unpack that a little bit?
Yeah, so servicification really just refers to that increasing integration of services with other sectors.
Okay.
So think about manufacturing companies that now offer, after-sales services or consulting services
Right.
alongside their, core products.
Okay.
So this trend is happening globally,
Yeah.
but India is actually really well positioned to benefit from it,
Okay.
given its large and skilled workforce
Right.
in the service sector.
The report emphasizes the importance of investing in education and skills development
Oh, yeah, big time.
to make sure that India's workforce, can meet the demands of this evolving sector.
Absolutely. Investing in human capital is absolutely crucial for India to maintain its competitiveness
Yeah.
in that global services market.
Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into India's economic landscape. It's been a pretty incredible journey.
Yeah, it has.
We've explored so many different facets of their economy.
We've covered a lot, from analyzing global trends to those specific sector deep dives. I mean, it's clear that India's economy is full of challenges,
Yeah.
but also opportunities.
It's a story of resilience,
Yeah.
innovation, and a nation that is really striving for sustainable and inclusive growth. We hope you've enjoyed this deep dive and that you've gained some valuable insights.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun.
And, remember, this is just the beginning.
Yeah, keep exploring, keep asking questions.
We encourage you to keep learning and forming your own perspectives on India's economic journey.